Merlin, the strongest yet the laziest Demon King, is forced to retire from his position to pay off his massive debts and moves to the human continent, running away from his responsibilities. He hides his true powers, pretending to be an ordinary loser, and earns a name for himself as the most infamous freeloader in town. Merlin Lucifer, our protagonist. Currently, Merlin is in the middle of writing the weekly report, when just outside, an unannounced army of human soldiers known as the Church Squad are just outside of his palace, battling his demon soldiers. Merlin's younger sister Lilith goes there to handle the situation and uses her dark charm magic to confuse and make her enemies fight each other. However, a single human soldier, one with an unshakable will, resists her magic entirely. She charges straight at Lilith and overwhelms her without hesitation. This woman is Alice, the 233rd hero of the Land of Light. Lilith, stunned, finally realizes that her charm magic had no effect because her enemy is a woman. So Lilith takes a more direct approach and jokingly attempts to seduce Alice, whispering to her that she wants her in her figurine collection. But before she can get far, Alice unsheathes her sword and engages her in an all-out battle. However, Lilith is the only one who lands a hit, which makes her realize that this generation's hero is nothing special and is pretty mid. Her comment triggers Alice, who retaliates by unleashing the full power of her holy sword. Still, Lilith doesn't take her seriously and attacks the holy sword with her hair made with dragon tendons, only for it to be torn apart in an instant, showing just how dangerous the holy sword truly is. Before long, Alice mounts Lilith, using her magical powers to cuff her hands and legs. With Lilith's defeat, the human soldiers celebrate their victory by shouting in unison, a noise that reaches Merlin's ears. At that moment, he finally snaps, tossing aside his paperwork to handle the disturbance. Meanwhile, with one enemy down, Alice gains the confidence to challenge the Demon King. She turns to the leader of their squad, the Grand Sage, asking for permission to march toward Merlin's palace. But the Grand Sage insists that he himself will be the one to eliminate the Demon King, who has killed countless human soldiers and heroes over the years and is the reason why their crusades failed every single time. He then unveils his ultimate weapon, a siege machine shaped like a whale, an unimaginable force the Church has been preparing for a century. The Grand Sage proudly declares that this whale is the pinnacle of human wisdom and technological advancement, truly the Church's greatest masterpiece. He releases the whale from the sky, ordering it to level everything in its path. Alice objects, suggesting they don't need to resort to such extreme measures, but the Grand Sage is resolute. He's determined to eradicate all demons, believing it's the warrior's glorious purpose. He activates the whale, and its massive mouth opens to launch a devastating holy plasma beam at the demon soldiers, intent on reducing them to ash with a single strike. At that very moment, Merlin Lucifer steps forward, positioning himself in front of his soldiers, and effortlessly shields them from the attack while remaining unscathed. He farms some aura by pulling his hair back, then steps onto the battlefield, landing directly on top of Alice's head. Now that's some next-level disrespect. Lilith immediately embraces her brother, complaining about how these cruel humans have bullied her, while Alice, still trapped under his legs, struggles to crawl out. Eventually, Alice manages to get out and starts complaining, but Merlin completely ignores her and instead asks Lilith who this blabbermouth is. Lilith replies, calling her a garbage-tier hero sent by the kingdom to hunt them down. Merlin dashes toward Alice to take a closer look of her pretty face, gives her a quick smile, and then casually sends her flying with a flick of his fingers. He mockingly states that the Land of Light are getting sloppy with choosing their heroes as he no longer needs to draw his sword to defeat them. The only thing that impresses him is the whale above, and he believes that maybe it can relieve the pain of his course for at least 2 days. Meanwhile, the Grand Sage steps forward and tells Merlin that he's here to return the humiliation of the last crusade. But Merlin doesn't even remember the event, nor does he recall who this old man even is. The Grand Sage tries to jog his memory, claiming to be the only human who survived their last battle and treating that as a major achievement. Merlin finally remembers and asks if he's that same coward who wet his pants and begged for his life, promising that if Merlin spared him, he would send more people as a gift to him so he can enhance his performance as a demon king. Hearing this, the hero and the rest of the soldiers are stunned, unable to believe that their leader stooped so low and even attempted to sell them out. The Grand Sage instantly denies the accusation, calling Merlin a liar while stuttering, and in a desperate move to silence him, he uses all his soldiers, gathering all of their magical energy and transferring it to the whale to increase its power 1,000-fold. But Merlin still doesn't see it as enough to bend even a single strand of his hair. Before the whale can launch its attack, he draws his dark blade, and with a single slash, he reduces the entire thing to rubble, completely wiping out the Grand Sage's plan. Realizing his defeat, the old man falls to his knees once again, and this time clings to Merlin's feet, begging for his life and throwing all the blame onto Alice, claiming that it was her idea to attack in the first place. At that moment, a bell rings from the castle, a reminder that it's time for the weekly meeting of the 7 Demon Kings. And Merlin now has to submit his weekly report. The realization hits him hard. He starts pulling at his hair in panic and rushes back to the castle since he hasn't written a single word, leaving his enemies completely speechless at how the most terrifying Demon King is actually scared of paperwork. Alice tries to stop him midway, reminding him that they're still in the middle of a battle. So Merlin ends it right then and there with another sword slash, annihilating all the humans except Alice, who barely manages to shield herself. Back at the castle, Merlin joins the meeting with the other Demon Kings, who already know he's made zero progress in improving the Land of Darkness. No profit, no progress, and, obviously, no report. Merlin tries to defend himself, saying he just defeated an entire army of humans, a giant flying whale, and has been doing real work, but no one cares. They want numbers and profits, because the palace needs money to run, not dead bodies. They show him how much the other Demon Kings have contributed, making it painfully clear that compared to them, Merlin has done absolutely nothing except slack off. They call him the worst Demon King in history, decide to cut his next week's budget, and ridicule him to the point where he finally snaps. Merlin reminds them that he's the one who has killed millions of enemies, guarded the first palace alone, and kept the other 6 weaker Demon Kings safe all these years. He believes that's a feat no one else can replicate and tells them to stop questioning him. But the others still don't agree, pointing out the massive damage he causes every time he steps onto the battlefield. One of the Demon King, the ruler of lust, pulls out a long list of all the destruction Merlin has caused. Destroying the palace 168 times, wrecking infrastructure, breaking battlefield pipelines over 31,000 times, and reveals that because of all this, they've been cutting his salary. Even worse, he currently owes the kingdom a whopping $66 trillion. This debt explains why Merlin, despite being the strongest, was so scared earlier. He can't run, he can't resign, he has to work to pay off the debt. After the absolute disaster of a meeting, Merlin decides to escape. He plans to leave the Demon King's palace forever to run from his debt, sneaking out quietly, until Lilith suddenly appears behind him and scares him half to death. He shares his grand plan with Lilith that hopes that once he's gone, the others will finally realize how much they relied on him and beg for his return. He even starts giggling, imagining his glorious comeback. Lilith, however, thinks he actually got fired. But Merlin insists he resigned to fix his cursed heart, which supposedly keeps shrinking. Although the curse is real, but this guy is clearly making an excuse. Apparently, the only thing that temporarily relieves the pain is slaying powerful enemies. He claims he'll now travel the world, hunting down the strongest foes to lift the curse once and for all. Lilith buys the story but still doesn't want him to go, knowing her brother won't survive a day in the outside world because he's simply worthless at doing anything else other than fighting. As she keeps insisting him to stay, he reveals he owes $66 trillion in debt to the other Demon Kings, and will have to work to death to pay it back if he stays here any longer. Hearing this, Lilith instantly changes her mind and sends him off, telling him to go find a new job and only return after making enough money to pay off what they owe. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield, Alice tries to play dead to avoid getting noticed by Lilith, who's casually wandering around. I mean, Alice is the only one left in the battlefield as the others have been reduced to nothing. So surely Lilith will notice her. And Lilith does, but she assumes Alice is dead and mutters how it's a shame that a pretty face like hers had to go so soon. She thinks of bringing Alice's body back to the palace to keep her as a part of her figurine collection, but moving her with all that armor would be a hassle. So instead, she decides to just take her head. But the moment she tries to incapacitate her, Alice flinches and moves away. Lilith bursts out laughing, revealing she knew all along that Alice was just pretending. This time, Lilith's done joking. She wants to punish Alice for embarrassing her earlier in front of her brother. Knowing she doesn't stand a chance, Alice bolts. Lilith, who loves a good cat-and-mouse game, summons 2 wolves to hunt down the pretty little mouse. Meanwhile, Merlin reaches the coast. To escape the demon continent, he has to cross the demon sea. He thinks he's in luck when he sees the leftover boats from the Grand Sage's army from the distance. But when he reaches the docks, every single boat has been completely wrecked, only now realizing that the same slash he used to wipe out his enemies earlier also destroyed the ships. Unfortunately, demons can't swim, even though there's the option to walk underwater, which leaves Merlin completely stuck, wondering how he's ever going to get out of this place. He has this small boat, but rowing it across the sea is too much of a hassle for him. That's when Alice comes running, still being chased by the wolves. Realizing that death is imminent, she finally remembers her master's words, how they always told her not to become a hero as she was still too weak and wouldn't stand a chance against non-human warriors. Back then, Alice didn't listen to her master's words, wanting to become famous. Moreover, staying with her master in barren snow mountains made her believe she'll never find the prince of her dreams. Only now does she understand that her master was right. This world is far too terrifying. She prays to the gods to let her live just once, promising that she'll only go out again after refining her skills. She somehow manages to gather enough strength to defeat one of the wolves, but the other transforms into its true demon form and completely overwhelms her. On the verge of death, she begs for mercy, screaming about how she wants to fall in love and have kids before dying. That's when her unlikely savior, Merlin, descends from the sky and casually turns the demon wolf into a harmless little puppy. He looks at Alice and comes up with a devilish idea to make her his slave so that he can get free manual labor. He reminds Alice, calling her a half-baked hero, that since he's saved her life, technically twice, she now belongs to him and must repay her debt by becoming his slave. Before she can even react, he lifts her up and takes her to the small rowing boat from before, planning to use her as a paddle engine to get across the demon sea, since he's too lazy to do it himself. Why did things have to turn out this way? Alice was supposed to defeat the evil demon king, win glory, and marry a handsome prince. This crusade was supposed to lead to her holding on to her handsome prince, but in reality, the only thing she is holding on to is a wooden paddle. Meanwhile, Merlin, who has nothing else to do, is striking a pose and farming aura. He tells Alice that she should cherish her position as his slave, calling it a blessing. But Alice murmurs to herself that this so-called blessing comes with 0 pay and 0 rest time. In any case, she keeps rowing the boat and tells him that she will repay him for this humiliation 1,000-fold. Once they reach her homeland, she channels her rage to row the boat super fast. But even in the rocking waves, Merlin stands firmly until she realizes he has stuck his foot against the boat to keep his balance. LOL. The day turns to night, and Alice eventually becomes exhausted from continuously rowing non-stop. On the other hand, Merlin brings out a stove from God knows where and cooks himself a delicious, steamy meal. While smelling the food, he asks Alice why she stopped rowing, calling her the most useless hero he's ever seen. Alice can no longer believe this guy. Her patience has reached its limits, and she throws the paddle at him, saying she quits. To get her back to work, Merlin offers to share his food, and even though initially Alice's ego doesn't let her agree, when her stomach starts growling, she gives in and eats the food. She finds it so delicious that she starts calling Merlin her master and breaks into tears, admitting that she's got no backbone at all. The smell of the meat attracts demon sharks, and getting scared, Alice runs straight into Merlin's lap. Merlin, with the slightest glare, scares the sharks away. Alice wonders why those monsters suddenly ran off. And Merlin doesn't miss the chance to brag, stating that in this entire ocean, the strongest creature is he himself, and that's why the sharks got scared. However, Alice doesn't think that's the case. She's heard that there's a sea monster living under this sea and hopes that they don't encounter it. To avoid its attack, apparently, they smeared some holy dragon dung on their ships. And hearing this, Merlin finally realizes why Alice's army smelled so stinky. She becomes defensive and goes on a very long lecture, telling him how the holy dragon's poop is more valuable than gold. But apparently, the dragon has mysteriously disappeared. If her words have the slightest truth in them, it means that if Merlin sells the dragon's poop, he might finally be able to pay his debts without working. So, he brings out a contract crystal that binds demon beasts and reveals that he has the holy dragon, who he's named Bucky, in his possession. He now wants to use Bucky's poop to repay his debt, and is kinda glad that he no longer needs to leave the continent. However, with a sudden twist of fate, Merlin's hand slips and the crystal falls into the sea. With the crystal lost and Merlin unable to swim, he has no other option but to go to the land of light with Alice. Moving on, they notice how calm the sea has gotten all of a sudden. With no fish anywhere to be seen, Merlin suspects that there's a powerful predator nearby. Just as he says so, the sea monster reveals itself from beneath them. However, Merlin doesn't engage with the monster, revealing to Alice that he can't swim. So Alice takes the initiative herself and stabs the sea monster with her sword, which not only does no damage at all, but actually infuriates the monster. Merlin tries to convince the monster to do something significant in its worthless existence by ferrying them across the ocean, but the monster spits at him instead. It then tries to devour them by sucking down all the nearby water, and as the boat is about to crack open, Merlin finally draws his sword and, with a single slash, slays the monster. Merlin may be arrogant and shameless, but one thing is now clear to Alice: Merlin is the strongest being in existence. The rest of their journey goes smoothly, and not long after, they reach the shore. Merlin comments on how exhausting this entire trip was for him, even though he just slacked off and made Alice do everything. Alice points out his hypocrisy, but Merlin states that he did make a contribution by commanding her wisely. Otherwise, they would have never made it ashore. Yeah, right. In any case, Merlin believes that Alice is too useless for him to keep as his slave anymore, so he fires her, telling her not to be sad about it, as it was never meant to be. She literally can't believe the sheer audacity of this guy. She shouts at him, saying she never wishes to see his face again, and turns the other way. But Merlin stops her again, as he needs her help once more. This time, he asks her to take off her armor, and as she resists, he takes it off himself, but not because he wanted to see her sacred plot. Actually, he has no cash and wants to sell Alice's mithril armor for money. He thinks he deserves it since he saved her again by defeating the sea monster earlier, and dashes away, finally leaving Alice stranded there at the shore. Meanwhile, back at his castle, Lilith is chilling around because she believes that her hopeless, useless brother will just crawl back to her after realizing how hard life is in the outside world. When Alice returns to the city, she isn't welcomed warmly, but dragged into court, held accountable for the deaths of her comrades. The judge declares that it was due to her incompetence that the troops sent to subjugate Merlin were completely annihilated. On top of that, she's also lost her mithril armor, which had been passed down to heroes for generations. As punishment, the judge strips her of her status as a hero and demands she compensate the kingdom with 50 million gold coins. Alice tries to defend herself, saying her armor was taken by the Demon King, but her excuses fall on deaf ears. The verdict is already final. A year passes, and Alice is now seen on a ship, fighting two pirates who are holy tears, one rank above her in combat. She's here to rescue the mayor's daughter, taken hostage, but she's so bad at fighting that the pirates burst into laughter mid-battle. Just as they're about to finish her off, something unexpected happens. A man suddenly lands on top of the two pirates, crushing them beneath his feet. He wonders aloud where the two holy tier pirates went to, not realizing that he has crushed them upon landing, and Alice informs him that they're right beneath his feet. It's clear he's Merlin in his human disguise, and he has come after overhearing that the pirates were holy tears and wants to slay them to numb the pain of his curse. Before attacking, Merlin politely apologizes to the two pirates, saying it's nothing personal, and draws his sword, cutting them down with a single slash that creates massive shockwaves, which also destroy the backup ships Alice had called in. Alice, unable to recognize him as the Demon Lord since she hasn't seen his face yet, starts fantasizing about having a romantic encounter with this mysterious adventurer. She slowly walks toward him, eager to see his face, but Merlin flies away like Superman before she can get close. Not long after, a news reporter delivers a live report on the incident, revealing to the public that the entire rescue fleet was wiped out by a mysterious criminal already known across the nation as the Nightblade. Alice grabs the mic from the reporter and offers her very much unwanted opinion that Nightblade is not a criminal, but a hero who defeated the Holy Tier pirates. She starts gushing over him, saying she's never seen such a strong, graceful swordsman, and genuinely admits how much she admires him. Anyway, Alice returns home and adds 250 gold to her stash, bringing her total savings to 10,000 gold. She gets excited, thinking she's finally making progress, and she only needs 49,990,000 more to clear her debt. And that's when she realizes just how truly screwed she is. She curses Merlin for not only ruining her reputation, but also saddling her with a pile of debt she can never repay. She slams her table in rage and accidentally spills water on her guild commission papers, which she carefully goes through again, only to notice a 5,000 gold bounty on a man who's apparently been freeloading in the south. Of course, this guy is Merlin, and his smug grin makes that more obvious. Alice begins to suspect it too, but quickly dismisses the thought, convinced that the Demon King wouldn't stoop as low as freeloading. In any case, she has other things to do. Before leaving, she worships the picture of Nightblade's back, kisses it, and begs him to bless her with enough luck to pay off her debt. At the same time, she curses the Demon King, hoping he falls into an endless debt at least 10 times worse than hers. Speaking of the devil, Merlin has made quite a name for himself over the past year as a wanted criminal. But what really hurts his ego is the bounty placed on him, only 5,000 gold. He continues farming aura until his stomach starts growling, forcing him to stop posing. Lol. He shares his misfortune with us, explaining how his grand plan to sell the mithril armor and become filthy rich fell apart when he blew all the money in just a few weeks. Since then, he's been freeloading and scamming his way across the land, doing whatever it takes to survive. Now, he's searching for his next target and comes across a small town. But just as he's about to enter, 2 robbers approach him. Before they can demand his belongings, Merlin plays the Uno reverse card and demands theirs, leaving them confused, wondering if they've accidentally crossed paths with another robber. He insists he's completely broke, but the robbers want his sword. Merlin tries to scare them off, warning that if he draws it, their worthless faces will be wiped off the map, but they laugh it off, thinking he's bluffing. One of the robbers even decides to show Merlin what true skill is by peeling an apple with style. While the other robber is impressed, Merlin, possibly the greatest swordsman alive, is not. To show them what real skill looks like, he calmly places the younger robber behind him, then draws his blade, slicing the older robber into pieces in a single motion, exposing the robber's true goblin form. The younger one panics, revealing himself as a goblin too, and flees for his life, dropping the apple, which Merlin gladly eats before heading into the town. The younger goblin eventually informs His Majesty of the incident. The Goblin King sees it as a clear violation of their peace treaty with humans. In truth, this had been his plan all along. He had disguised several of his kin as humans and scattered them around to provoke a conflict. Now that some idiot has finally taken the bait, the Goblin King is ready. He commands his soldiers to raid the human town, loot everything they can, and take the women and children as slaves. Meanwhile, Lilith gets a letter from Merlin about how well his life in the Land of Light is, and how he now lives in a magnificent castle and is served by hundreds of servants. Yeah, buddy, a tent and a dog are your castle and hundreds of servants. The letter also claims that Merlin is extremely popular among women and that they line up to get his autograph. But the truth is very different. It's actually bounty hunters who've lined up after him. In any case, Merlin tells Lilith not to worry, saying his life is very enjoyable and that he won't be returning unless the other demon kings beg him to come back with a written formal apology. Lilith is happy to hear how her brother's doing and is glad she doesn't need to worry about him starving to death. Back in the town where Merlin went to freeload, he's already done at one of the shops and has defeated the shop's hatchet man. The shopkeeper gets scared upon recognizing Merlin, and Merlin gladly lets him get a good look at his gorgeous face, assuming someone has finally realized that he is the ruler of pride from the first Demon King's palace. However, the shopkeeper only recognizes him as the petty freeloader of the South, leaving him devastated by the fact that his entire reputation as the Demon King has been ruined because of his side quests. Anyway, the shopkeeper screams for help, yelling that the freeloader of the South has appeared, and in an instant, support arrives from everywhere. Not wanting to pick a meaningless fight, Merlin dashes away, yelling that he is not a freeloader. While walking back, he runs into a kid who is impressed by his looks and offers to pay him if he puts on a good performance. Merlin decides to put on a show for the kid, but at the last second refrains from drawing his sword. He doesn't want to risk the kid getting hurt. Still, he thinks he's done enough and demands at least 10 gold coins for his performance. But the kid, not so easy to fool, refuses and calls Merlin a pathetic loser for trying to scam people instead of getting an actual job. Merlin has had enough disrespect from this 12-year-old and, to make him pay, snatches the ice cream cone from the kid and throws it to the ground. The kid calls Merlin a demon, but Merlin doesn't take it as an insult because that's exactly what he is. He walks away in the opposite direction, just as a carriage pulls up and Alice steps out. She's on a mission and has arrived with a group of adventurers, one of whom wonders why Alice's hero status was revoked. At that moment, the man who bought Alice's armor from Merlin announces his new book, in which he details how the Demon King enslaved hero Alice and tormented her both physically and mentally. Perhaps he heard everything directly from Merlin when he bought the mithril armor. Alice can't believe what she's hearing and tries to convince the girl in the group that none of that ever happened. But the girl, trusting the random bookseller more, shows pity and says everyone has a past they wish to forget. Not wanting her reputation to be completely destroyed, Alice demands that the bookseller stop selling his stupid book, but learns that he's already sold over 5 million copies. Hearing this, Alice experiences what she calls a social life death and falls into depression. When she finally recovers from the trauma, the group discusses their mission to hunt down a band of goblin bandits living in a cave not far from the village. But before that, the couple in the group announces their plan to get married, which Alice finds ominous, because something tells her these nameless side characters are going to die for the sake of the plot. The couple discusses their future and keeps triggering foreshadowing flags like last mission, retirement, going back home, and nothing is going to go wrong. Alice tries her best to shut them up but fails and lets them go on their mission. She herself is on a different mission, to find the freeloader of the South. Speaking of whom, Merlin is at a tavern, eating everything on the menu before trying to sneak out on his tippy toes. But he gets caught by the manager, Martha, and has to make the excuse that he wants to apply for a job at her place. He claims to be a graduate from the Royal Academy and lists off tons of fake skills, even adding that he's never been in debt in his life. Martha still isn't impressed and doesn't think he's fit to be a waiter, so to convince her, he uses a skill he learned from the ruler of lust and literally starts disco dancing. I love the fact that this dance is literally in the opening song of this anime. Finally, Boss Lady Martha is impressed and maybe even wants to take Merlin as her husband. She hires him, offering to pay 1 gold per shift and a 15% commission on drinks sold. And Merlin, who was just playing along, now really wants this job. Martha tells him to start working that night and casually mentions she'll be deducting the cost of his meal from his first pay. She introduces him to her son, Henry, who turns out to be the same kid from before. This time, however, Henry can't insult Merlin thanks to Martha's presence. Anyway, Merlin's shift starts in a few hours, so for now, Henry takes him to the guest room. On the way, Merlin tries to make up for earlier by promising to teach Henry his ultimate blade strike for free if he lets bygones be bygones. but Henry refuses this once-in-a-lifetime offer, claiming Merlin doesn't even know how to swing a sword. He proudly declares that the only person he wants to train under is Nightblade, whom he idolizes as a justice-loving vigilante. Merlin is beyond flattered and proudly reveals to Henry that he is Nightblade. But instead of being amazed, Henry kicks him into the room and, fed up with his lies, walks off. On the other side, the group of adventurers who went to subjugate the goblin bandits are now surrounded by an army of goblins and are at their wits' end. Oh, who could have seen that coming? Definitely not Alice. The girl is about to be killed, and to save her, her boyfriend strikes a deal with the goblin mage. Going back to the tavern, the newest recruit is half slacking and half serving. Even though he's serving pretty fast, the customers aren't pleased and want the regular, "There you go, sir. Enjoy your drink" service. Merlin doesn't care, though, and tells the customer that he should feel honored to be served by him personally. However, it seems Merlin's only being rude to the male customers, as he gladly acts like a proper waiter for the ladies and even gives them complimentary cake. Bro is out here stealing others' girlfriends and literally puts on a performance for all the ladies there who are in love with him and with this tavern, while the males, let's just say their insecurities will no longer allow them to come here. Still, Martha, the owner of the tavern, is happy because her drink sales have skyrocketed, and she compliments Merlin, calling him a top performer. Merlin wants to record Martha's compliments and show them to the other rulers because they believe he's a zero. Coming back to Martha, she tells Merlin that all the girls of this town are raving about him, and so she wants to utilize this opportunity by publishing his information in the paper. Merlin knows if that happens, his entire reputation as the most fearsome demon lord will be tarnished. Not wanting that to happen, he begs Martha to not do it, telling her that he wants to have a low profile and promising to serve each customer well in exchange. Martha falls for Merlin's alluring words, and perhaps literally falls for him, but her son Henry is going to allow it. She doesn't want this freeloader to end up becoming his stepdad, and warns Merlin that if he ever tries to mess with his mom, he will beat him up. Merlin plays it nicely in front of Martha, but deep down, he really wants to spank this spoiled brat. Later, Alice is walking around town looking for traces of the freeloader when she overhears Henry, who's been loudly beating up a tree, saying, "Oh, I'll teach you a lesson, you freeloader." She shows him the bounty picture, and Henry somehow doesn't recognize Merlin's evil smirk. He tells her that the freeloader he was talking about works at his mom's tavern and is conning women into buying drinks, mentioning that he's generated half of their yearly revenue in just a few days. Alice doesn't think the guy is the freeloader she is looking for, but the men of the village want her to teach him a lesson anyway, because he's kind of stealing their women. They offer a bag of gold coins in exchange, so Alice accepts this new job and goes to the tavern to investigate the waiter, who goes by the name Daisy the Charmer. As she enters the tavern, she finds the entire place in chaos. Mostly women screaming and clapping for Merlin, who's putting on an over-the-top salsa dance for them. Although his eyes are hidden, his smile definitely matches with the picture on the bounty, and Alice confirms that he's the freeloader of the South. But she doesn't want to cause a commotion, as she knows he has great ways of escaping. So she tries to get closer to him first in the darkness, but as she approaches him, the spotlight points at her, and Merlin notices her. He, of course, doesn't recognize her worthless existence and forces her to dance with him. But soon enough, he does realize she's the half-baked hero he used as his slave a year ago. And at the same time, Alice realizes that the freeloader of the South is Merlin, the Demon King. The realization totally petrifies her, but when she remembers how much he's ruined her life already, she grabs her sword and tries to rapidly stab his face. Merlin, of course, dodges every single one of her attacks and asks her to be reasonable, reminding her that they are old acquaintances. But Alice doesn't consider him to be an acquaintance of hers and states that she wants revenge. Merlin mounts on top of her and, to calm her down, tells her about their time together and how they got along. Alice breaks into tears, telling Merlin if he feels no remorse for leaving her in such a state back at the beach. She expresses how much he has hurt her and blames everything she's been through on him. So, she tells him to take responsibility if he's truly a man. Her words can be taken in a different context, and the ladies hear something entirely different. They think that Merlin took advantage of her and then abandoned her. Realizing how much of a bad person he is, they decide to leave. Merlin demands Alice explain the misunderstanding to the ladies, but she keeps crying, telling him to give her back her armor. The tavern closes to resolve this situation, and Martha, who is also heartbroken thinking Alice is Merlin's girlfriend or something, tells him to sort out everything between him and her. Merlin has had enough. He tells Alice to stop crying because he thinks if anyone should be crying, it's him. He blames her for causing a scene and ruining his show. Not only is his reputation tarnished, but he also didn't get any tips tonight. But Alice believes everything she did is justified. She tells Merlin that she'll leave him alone if he gives her back her armor. Merlin doesn't understand, as he really believes that it was a gift from Alice to him for saving her multiple times. And even if he did take from her, he thinks it's justified because over the years, the Land of Light has looted a lot from the Land of Darkness. Alice doesn't care though, and just wants her armor back because if she manages to return it to the kingdom might close her debts. Unfortunately for her, Merlin has sold it for tens of millions of gold coins and has spent all of it in no time. But he tells her to not worry about it, saying that her armor was just a piece of junk. Alice still doesn't care and threatens to arrest Merlin if he doesn't give her armor back to her somehow. Hearing her threat, Merlin starts to smile like a villain, because who is she kidding? He reminds her of the fact that he defeated a sea monster with a single strike that scared her country's strongest navy, to the point that they placed dragon poop in their ships. So, she must be a fool if she thinks she or anyone in this country can arrest him. Alice also realizes that and throws away her sword. She tells Merlin that she owes the country 50 million gold in debt, and Merlin is impressed. In the course of this year, he only owes a few thousand gold coins here and there, and the fact that she somehow racked up 50 million is crazy to him. But what he doesn't realize is that it's all his fault. She, with her broken heart, finally explains everything to him, how the kingdom has saddled her with this massive debt for losing the armor that he stole, and how she had to join the Adventurers Guild and take on high-risk missions to save up money to pay her debts. Merlin ignores Alice's depressing story completely and puts his focus on the Adventurers Guild, asking her if there are really high rewards and holy tier enemies. He needs both money and strong foes to survive and can't let go of this opportunity, so he requests Alice to let him know how he can become an adventurer. After learning the process, he tries to charm her, saying that they are old buddies and she should refer him, saying that his childhood dream has been to become an adventurer. I must admit, bro is a pro liar, and Alice, seeing through his lies, tells him to just get lost. Meanwhile, Martha's son Henry is upset and is roaming around the gates of the town late at night as he doesn't want to go back to the place where the despicable freeloader is. At that moment, the guy who struck a deal with the goblin mage earlier comes to the gate, telling the guard to open the gate. Apparently, it's a rule that during midnight the gates cannot be open, but the guy tells the guard to make an exception, stating that he's lost all of his comrades in a mission and has barely escaped. So, the guard lets him in, not knowing that there's an army of goblins hiding right behind him. With the gates open, the goblins launch an all-out attack, and the mage, who struck a deal with the guy, attacks him first, telling him to join his comrades as their slaves because goblins never negotiate. Henry overhears everything and quickly hides behind a pile of hay bales, scared for his life. On the other hand, Alice steps outside to calm herself down and wonders why the Demon Lord stripper dancer now wants to be an adventurer. She's upset that she'll never get that 5,000 gold anymore, as it's practically impossible to catch Merlin. The only thing she's certain of is that if she gets involved with him again, it will only bring her terrible luck. Her only hope now is to meet her Prince of Dreams, Nightblade, who she believes will save her from this demon. After venting her frustration, she looks around and notices the nearby houses are on fire. Meanwhile, two goblin brutes barge into the tavern. Merlin, assuming they're customers, welcomes them in, but when the goblins announce that they're here to loot the place, Merlin throws them out and assures the guests that there's no need to panic, winning their hearts yet again. Martha wonders why goblins are showing up at this time of night and becomes worried for her son, Henry, who hasn't returned home yet. She rushes outside, telling Merlin to handle things at the tavern, and he takes it upon himself to deal with the waves of goblins that keep coming one after another. After defeating them, he grabs his sword and heads out to help Martha, because if she gets hurt, he won't get paid for his work. Martha is almost reunited with her son, but the goblins get to her first and drag her off to make her their slave. Henry wants to help, but his legs won't move. He subconsciously knows that only death awaits if he steps out of hiding. On the other hand, Merlin casually strolls past the chaos, ignoring the goblins. But the goblins keep making the mistake of attacking him every time, and each attempt results in their demise. Alice confronts Merlin, convinced that he conspired with the goblins to attack the village. Merlin replies by asking how a hero could have such low IQ. He makes it clear that he, the mighty demon king, would never stoop so low as to team up with pathetic creatures like goblins. He doesn't have time to deal with Alice's dumb accusations, so he ignores her and walks away. She suggests they team up to save the townspeople by driving out the goblin, but he's not doing it for free and demands 10,000 gold in return. Of course, Alice doesn't have the money, and he's the reason she owes 50 million, so there's no way she'll pay him a single penny. With nothing more to say, Merlin walks away, leaving Alice no choice but to defend the village on her own. She begins fighting off the goblins using her ice magic, taking them down one after the other, even though they begin to outnumber her. That's when the goblin mage steps up to battle Alice, claiming that even an elite-tier mage like her can't win against an entire army alone. Just then, a younger goblin who had fled from Merlin when he first entered the town comes crying to the goblin mage, reporting that he saw that monstrous guy knock out half their warriors on the other side of town. The goblin mage looks through the eyes of her minions. That was the end of part 1. But guys, no need to wait for part 2. I've already uploaded it on my second channel. The link is in the end screen and the pinned comment. Enjoy watching.